Hey everyone, just Thomas here, wanting to talk about something that's really near and dear to my heart, something that I don't think we really talk about enough in in this country, in the United States, not just as Americans but as Christians. And anyone who watched my previous video, I'm a newcomer to social media. I'm trying to get myself established, spread some, spread the gospel, to put the gospel into action, so that way it's not just, fancy words, empty words. A lot of times it's just, empty words that we're getting. But what I really want to do is I really want to show in a truly active way, what it means to live as a Christian. So I personally, I'm Catholic. I'm a convert to the Catholic Church, and I live in Georgia, which, so I live in the Bible Belt, and there's a lot of, a lot of Christians here, and unfortunately, sometimes we don't see eye to eye. But well, that's a subject for another video, because we could talk for hours and hours about the reasons why we don't get along. But at the end of the day, guess what? We're all Christians. We all are called to love one another. And notice that word, love. We're called to love one another. And that is something that I think is horribly misunderstood in our culture. And that's something that I really want to work to change. So in the Catholic tradition, we have St. Thomas Aquinas, and famous for writing the Summa Theologica. And his definition of love was willing the good of the other as other. So that means that we will somebody's good for that person's sake, not because we want anything out of it. So for example, if we do something good for someone, we do it because we want to do that, because we care about that person, not because we want to be praised, not because we want to feel good. Like I said in my previous video, being a Christian, doesn't mean doing what makes you feel good, because sometimes doing the right thing is difficult. Sometimes doing the right thing does not make you feel good, but the reality of the situation is that when you do the right thing, you are being just. And feelings, sometimes you feel good, sometimes you don't. And that's just the way it is. Feelings are, they come and go. They ebb and flow. So, but when you truly love somebody, you're being just. And there's a lack of understanding, especially in politics. I mean, in politics, no matter whether you're Republican, Democrat, you are faced with all kinds of hatred, all kinds of, just sometimes even violence. Now, we've seen some people even be killed over it. And it's so sad, because, Jesus says, love one another as I have loved you. Okay, now why do we love one another? And the answer to that is we love one another because, well, one, because Jesus says so, but Jesus says so because we all have human dignity, because we are made in God's image and God's likeness. And that means that we are children of God. Even people who don't believe in God, even people who, don't practice any kind of religion, people who don't go to church, guess what? They're still God's children. We're called to love every single person and to treat them in a manner in which we would want to be treated. And that's, it's known as the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Well, it has biblical foundations. And we see this lack of love, this lack of understanding, because understanding is part of it. Unfortunately, I grew up with abuse, and that's something that I want to talk about in future videos. But I did not have that capacity to love fully. And I personally, did not experience it until I was much older, until about 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And when I came into the Catholic Church is when I experienced, a true loving environment. People who wanted me to do well for my own sake. And that was something that I had never experienced outside of Christianity before. Outside of Catholicism, at least. I'm not that familiar with other denominations, and I know many of them are very, very welcoming. So but my point is, I had not experienced it, and so the subject of love became a very important topic to me. And studying it has, I've been able to really grow as a person, because I realize that, sometimes what we think is good for somebody, is not actually good. It's not actually loving. Because if love is willing the good of the other for their sake, then sometimes that means tough love. Sometimes that means you've got to call people out on their, on their mistakes. Sometimes that means, you have to call yourself out. Jesus said, do not look at the splinter in your brother's eye until you've worked on the beam or removed the beam in your own eye. So it's not just for others, but we're called to love ourselves. Love your neighbor as yourself. So we need to pick the beam out of our eye and also be there to help our neighbor get the splinter out of their eye. But we have to have this understanding of love. We have to have this, compassion and understanding. St. John the Apostle, he would tell his followers over and over and over again up until the day that he died, I want you to love one another. I believe he would say, little children, love one another. And people would get frustrated. Well, don't you have anything else to say to us? St. John, you always say the same thing. Don't you have anything else to say to us? Well, he says, in telling you to love, I'm telling you the whole of Christianity is love. So love one another, love yourself. And a lot of us don't know what that means. I didn't know what true love was for over 20 years. And It's a beautiful thing once you experience it. And if you've had it your whole life, then you're truly blessed. And for anyone who doesn't have it, you will. And you have God's love, but God will put somebody in your life to show you that love, because that's what happened to me. And if it can happen to me, I know it can happen to other people. But we need to put hate aside, because I can tell you right now, the devil wants to bring people or separate people, divide and conquer. That is his strategy. And we make it very easy for him to do it, especially right now in our country, with all of this division, all of this hatred, and even violence. We cannot let this happen. We need to come back to true love. We need to love unconditionally. And that means calling people out on when they do something wrong, especially if they do something hurtful. If somebody hurts you, tell them. If somebody hurts someone else, tell them. Say it in a loving way, but be firm about it. And just remember that no matter who you are, no matter what you've done, no matter if you have the most supportive family in the world or you don't, you are loved by God. God loves you, and he calls you to love yourself, and he calls you to love your neighbor, who is everyone around you. So please, please don't forget, God loves you. Bye, everyone.